Next, I'd like to welcome Brigadier General Spalding. Where are you? Are you here? There you are. To take the stage and offer us a second keynote. A member of the President Trump's National Security Council, and now at large, we're more than willing to hear everything you have to say about an American perspective on the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's certainly an honor for me to be here at the 10th anniversary of MLI. This is, it's very humbling for me to be here in such warm environment as an American. So in 2017, December, we released a national security strategy. That strategy was actually begun, the work on it was begun in the summer of 2014. And for the almost 4 years that we worked on the strategy, we tried to imagine how we take what we've built since the end of World War II into the future, into a digitized future. So it's actually quite interesting that we're here surrounded by the tools of national security in the 20th century, while at the same time being surrounded by the strategic resource, as we say, in the national security strategy of the 21st century. And what am I talking about here? Data. Why is data so important? If you listen to Kai-Fu Lee, which is China's leading AI thought leader, he says that China is to data what Saudi Arabia is to oil. Now, why should that matter to us? In 2007, when Steve Jobs designed the iPhone, you can Google Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft's response. He said, who's going to buy a $500 subsidized device? And the answer was everybody. At the time, if you looked at the top 5 in market capitalization, it was Microsoft, AT&T, General Electric, ExxonMobil, and Shell. In 10 years, the synergy between this device and 4G networks created a global economic transformation. In 2018, the top 5 were Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft still made it, representing 15% of the Standard & Poor's total valuation. Why? Well, at the same time that was going on, that this was dominating the apps, services, and business models of our current economy, 4 companies in the United States, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon, were building 4G networks. They spent a total of $250 billion. And today, they still haven't paid off those investments. Why? Because the FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, came over the top and took all the value out of the system. So in the national security strategy, when we say the strategic resource of the 21st century is data, we're talking about how data has fundamentally transformed the global economy, but not just the global economy. It has given the power to foreign nations the ability to influence our democratic principles right down to the individual level. So in 2016, 4 days after our election, we had a protest in New York City. Anywhere from 15 to 25,000 people marched right up to Trump Tower on behalf of an organization on Facebook called Black Lives Matter. Except it wasn't an organization called Black Lives Matter. It was the Russians using artificial intelligence bots, social media networks, and big data analysis. The Russians created a protest right on the streets of the American city. Now, I flew for almost 27 years what I would consider the most, incredible technological weapon system in the world, the B-2. And I felt I could go anywhere and drop a bomb anywhere. But what we didn't realize, and what we saw in the summer of 2014, was the fact that when we had been spending $800 billion building this massive war machine, the ability to undermine our own society was being created by our own corporate system. Now, why is that important to us here? Well, because we all value civil liberties, rule of law, self-determination, and free trade. It's actually outlined in the Atlantic Charter, a document that was signed collectively by Winston Churchill and FDR in August of 1941. It really laid out the template for the international order that we think exists today. And yet, in 2017, in the summer, the EU voted for the first time not to sanction China for human rights violations at the UN. Why? Because Greece and Hungary abstained. So what we saw in the national security strategy, that not only data, but economics and finance and trade were crucial to how geopolitics runs in the 21st century. And while we had lost the ability to move international institutions like the UN and WTO, a regime that essentially repudiates democratic principles, free trade, rule of law, and self-determination, had essentially acquired the ability, using the tools of globalization and the internet, to move those systems in their favor, to our own detriment, and had also acquired, through our tools and through our business models, the ability to influence our own societies. And so what do we face going forward? So in building this system, you can today open an app on your phone and get a car to come out here to the museum and pick you up and take you home. That's 4G world. What is the 5G world? Well, if you've lived in China recently, you see elements of it. You open an app called WeChat, you go into a restaurant, a camera recognizes your face, and the server hands you your food and greets you by name. Right? The beginnings of what is going to be a 5G world. And what is a 5G world? It's a world where the smartphone goes away and it's built into the city around you. So rather than opening an app on your smartphone, you walk outside the door, say Uber. Camera sees your face, does facial recognition, reads your lips, and a car speeds you on your way. Most likely without a driver. Why is that important? Who owns the data? Right, so we're very focused on Huawei, but we're not focused on what is carried on that network, and that is the data. Why is it so important? I encourage you to read Engineering Global Consent, a report put out by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute by a researcher named Samantha Hoffman that talks about Global Tone Communication Corporation, a big data and AI company in China, does language translation in 65 languages. This company collects 2 to 3 petabytes of data per year. 1 petabyte of data is 1,000 terabytes. And it uses that through machine learning to provide translation services to its customers. Its products are built in, its technology is built into some Huawei products. But GTCom, as it's known for short, is collectively owned by the Ministry of Finance and the propaganda arm of the Chinese Communist Party. Where does that data go? It doesn't stop in translating languages. It goes to the intelligence arm of the People's Liberation Army and the influence arm of the Chinese Communist Party. This is the world that we built. This is the world that we are moving into, and the weapons that are around us aren't the weapons that are going to protect us. When we think about going forward in the future, we have to think about how our future has changed and our responsibility in that effort. Today, we allow the corporate sector to drive these tools and these business models into our lives without really understanding the implications or really knowing how to implement policy that creates a better future for our children and grandchildren. That's what's at stake. And if we don't wake up and focus on preserving the democratic principles that we've grown to know and love, we will be a victim of our own success. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for a very stark warning of the perils that the Indo-Pacific provides, and so plainly and clearly explaining the challenges of cybersecurity, data privacy, and the technological revolution we're amidst. Thank you, General Spalding. Really appreciate your commentary and look forward to your participation in the panel in a few moments. We're running a little bit behind schedule here, so I am happy to let you know that the intermission will begin for a period of time. Soon you'll see this podium disappear, and we will commence a panel with Mercedes Stevenson and a couple of other exciting guests. During the intermission, there'll be two videos that I'd like to draw your attention to. The first will be celebrating Macdonald-Laurier's 10th anniversary, and the second is a very special message from an Indian legislator, one of the finest minds India has to offer the world, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Please enjoy your dinner, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.